All right, good morning, everybody. The first thing I would like to say about Monday, October 7th, is that this is midterm week. Now, in ES 1060, we do not have a scheduled midterm exam. We are just working through our textbook. And we are this week going to be doing chapter 2. Now, having said that, if it turns out that you would like to have a midterm, if you feel like it would raise your grade, please contact me and make arrangements for that. But in general, I'm not planning to do a midterm with you. And if you have an A in the class, then I would say, why would you do that? Because there would be no reason to. But I'm just giving you that option in case your grade is not what you want it to be. So if it is what you want it to be, just assume everything is great. Also today, I will be getting caught up with grading. So by the end of today, I'll have everything graded and you'll know what your midterm grade is going to be. So you'll also have the opportunity to decide if you want to take a midterm or not. All righty, so hang on a second. There we go. So having said that, on your Moodle page, if you take a look through here, you'll see that this week, which I caught up our Moodle page on Friday last, that we have lecture and lab today. I will make an optional lecture on Wednesday. Did I? Let's see. I have this hidden. I don't know why. Oh, that's because that's old stuff. All right, here we go. So there we go. So basically, we're going to work through chapter 2. We have part 1 and part 2. And then by Thursday, October 10th, I will ask you to submit the exercises for chapter 2, and that will be included as part of your midterm grade. Now, your midterm grade is just a temporary placeholder, so it's not on your permanent record in any way. It's just a grade that I send out to you to let you know how you're doing. And in a class like this, if you have everything turned in, you're going to be fine. So there's no high stakes tests. So if you've done the work, you will be fine. And when I say fine, I mean you'll have a passing grade. Many of you will be having excellent grades, more excellent than a C. So I think if you have anything to worry about, it will become apparent at this particular time after we get those grades out. And I'll get the grades out right away. So there's nothing, you will not have any mystery in your life after that. All right, so chapter 2, the homework is once again all of the problems in chapter 2, which are problems 2.1 through 2.25. And those problems are scattered throughout or segmented throughout this particular chapter. Why is this coming up in chapter 1? Here we go, 2.1. All right, there we go. So chapter 2 just talks about some of the specifics that are involved in editing a spreadsheet. So it talks about the different ribbons, the exit button, the tabs, and the title bar. There's one thing I would like to alert you to. You may have already discovered this, but if you go into Excel through the Microsoft Office suite, which is available on your start button if you're using the Northwest College system, you may be coming up, depending on where you are, as a OneDrive file, or you may put it onto your hard drive or your student drive. So just so that you know, if you put it on your OneDrive, then you have to VM into the system if you're working from home. But if you or the other way around. So if you want to put it onto your VM, you can do that as well, but you just have to be aware of where you're storing it. So depending on how you get in, you may have a different, you may go into it later and not see it and then not know where it is. So I just want to make that obvious so that you don't scare yourself as I do sometimes. If you've worked with Excel in the past, chapter 2 will still be largely a review. We're not really going to get into new stuff until we get into chapter 4. We start getting into stuff that most people have not worked with too much, but it talks about some of the definitions of Excel. For example, the way that things are organized is by cells, and cells are identified by an address, which has to do with the column, which are letters. So columns go up and down, just like a column that supports a roof or a porch or a house or whatever, and then rows go across. So cell is identified by the row and the column in which it exists. Then a little bit last week, I think we were working with how you put formulas and so forth into Excel, but we kind of continue that process as we go through chapter 2. Now, it also talks about moving around the spreadsheet and how to go one row, one column, or a page down column, or many, many columns. And so a lot of this stuff is stuff that's probably familiar to you, even if you haven't really assigned a name to it. Now, the other part is we're going to start working with formulas. So when we talk about grade reports here, this is on problem 2.3. This is actually, and this can come in handy for you as well. If you wish to compute your grade point average and you don't have your schedule available to you, you can sort of make a spreadsheet that would automate that process for you, where you could change your grade in the course and have your GPA recomputed, for example. So this is like some useful stuff that probably for some of you is familiar, but we're making sure everybody gets familiar with it so that everybody gets to be on the same page. So the next part, which is probably the first new part that some people are going to be encountering, would be like comparison operators. So not only can you do arithmetic functions and strings. The strings are really kind of fun, I think. You can do a lot of really neat things using a string operator, which is the ampersand sign. But the comparison operators, you can do same things that you can do in algebra: greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and not equal to. So all of these are available to you in Excel. So one of the things that they ask you to do is to evaluate this algebra expression, and it just tells you how to write it out. Okay, there's not a left-hand side and a right-hand side of the equation. The left-hand side of the equation actually is the cell itself. So the left-hand side, or the answer, will display itself in the Excel spreadsheet. And that's kind of a tie back to structured programming, where it's in algebra, when you're handwriting equations, it's better form to put the answer on the left and the equation or the unknowns on the right. Programming insists upon that. So Excel also sort of insists upon it, so much so that it just assumes that the left-hand side of the equation is the left-hand side. The left-hand side of the equation and the cell address are identical, so they don't even put that in there. Now, the other part is that anytime you want to do a mathematical expression, start it with equal sign. Even if it's just that just separates, that's Excel's way of separating out a number from an expression, or it can be an expression that's a specific string. But equal means you're going to put something in that's a function that the cell is going to relate to, rather than just like putting a title, like variable or something like that. But anytime that you do any sort of an operation, you just put an equal sign. And Excel is pretty good at not requiring a lot of stuff to go between a string and a variable, except that you can't add in letters unless they refer to something else. But it's not picky the way that MATLAB was. So that's kind of a nice feature as well. And I would say overall, Excel is not very picky. So that's kind of nice. So you can be a little bit looser with your programming in Excel, and it doesn't throw you to the wolves the way that some programming languages will. All right, so the other part is it will sometimes tell you if you have a typo. It will think about it like here. The typo would be the cell address always starts with a column and then is followed by the number. And here, this is a nonsensical cell address. They're asking for A31. But the other thing is, if it were like 3 times A1, you would need to have an asterisk here to do that operation. Or if it's A1 or A31, those would be 2 different cells. So you just need to think about that as well. But that's sort of the extent of how, if you mess something up, you can put things in that are not going to yield what you want it to do. All right, so the operator precedence. This is similar to what we do in algebra, where you look at the order of operations. Okay, percentage is the top of the list here, but as you remember, if you remember the order of operations, it's sort of P, E, M, D, A, S. Okay, so it's sort of the same thing here. Only in algebra, in standard algebra, the P stands for parentheses. So parentheses are done first, which is still true here. It doesn't explicitly say it. The next thing that's done is an exponent, then multiplication and division. And it's really important to note, a lot of students come out of arithmetic or algebra kind of confused about this, but it's not that multiplication is done first and then division is done first. It's that the math sentence is read from left to right, and the first multiplication or division is done first, and then the second one is done, and so forth. So that's why they're written on the same line. Same with addition and subtraction. And then here we have a concatenation, which is bringing together 2 things, and then last is comparisons. So if you start getting weird numbers out of your cells, if you check your order of operations and put in parentheses in appropriate places, you can always make that work out, just like in algebra. All right, you can also name your cells, which is really interesting. It's a little bit fancier, but it's a way of bookkeeping that can be very helpful. So if you do that, you don't have to say, like here, if you're adding up the total, if you call this part 1, part 2, and part 3, you don't have to type in C3, C4, and C5. You can just type in part 1, part 2, part 3, and get the numeric answer at the end. Sometimes that comes in handy. This is kind of a simple little example, but sometimes that can be really helpful, especially if you have somebody else doing your input who doesn't understand the structure of Excel. It can be helpful. All right, so then we just get into these problems. I like this very much, but this is a calculation of your grade point average. We talked about this a little bit before, but if you are unfamiliar, the capital letter here is a Greek letter called sigma, which means summation. And so what it's saying is you start at the very beginning at I, and you multiply C times G for each instance and add them together, and then divide it by the sum of C. Well, what is that? C is credits, and G is the number of points you get for each of that. So what this is a weighted average. And what that means is like if you're taking a chemistry class and it's worth 5 credits or 4 credits, and you're taking orientation to engineering and it's worth 1 credit, this will take into account the fact that chemistry is going to count for more in your grade point average in a weighted manner than will orientation to engineering. Some of the other neat things about these problems is they bring in some real, not real world, but some engineering type problems, like using the ideal gas law. PV is equal to nRT, where pressure times volume is equal to the number of moles times the ideal gas constant times temperature. Couple of points about this. You need to use temperature in absolute units. So in this formula, they're always using kelvins. And you see also, I just realized they incorrectly put degree sign in front of the Kelvin, so there we go. I'm sure everybody knows what it means, but there it is, incorrect, just the same. But you have to put in the temperature in absolute degrees. R, the ideal gas constant, you notice has very strange units, liter atmosphere per mole degree Kelvin. There are other ideal gas constants that use different sets of units. And then, of course, N is the number of moles, which is, remember, Avogadro's number, 8.23 times 10 to the 23rd particles, is like a big, I always heard it described as being a big dozen. So it's not how heavy it is, it's just how many of them there are. And even though Avogadro's number is a huge number, it's still the same idea. Because on a molecular level, of course, particles react with each other 1 to 1 or 1 to 2 or whatever on that level of number. The volume here is given in liter and the pressure is given in atmospheres. So you can program in this and find out, do different things, then change pressure a little bit, change volume, whatever, and calculate the unknowns based on that input. Now, the only thing I would say is what is the pressure? If the temperature is changed to 37 degrees Celsius, make sure you change it to kelvins or absolutes before you move forward. This is a great formula that will either improve or damage your life forever, which is compound interest. So what compound interest means is if you borrow money from a bank, or God forbid that you carry credit card debt, they will charge you interest on the interest. And the credit cards will also do an extra interesting thing, which is charge you service charges if you miss a payment or are late on a payment, and then they'll charge you interest on that as well. So what compound interest means, it's like simple interest would be if you borrow $100 at 8% interest, at the end of the year, you owe somebody $108. If you compound interest, the next year you would be charged on $108. And so your interest would be a little bit higher. And so it escalates. And if the interest rate is high, it will escalate rather quickly. But this formula just says that the future value of money is equal to the present value of money times the quantity 1 plus I raised to the n, where n is the number of compounding periods and I is the interest rate per compounding period. So this is a very, very useful formula. It's actually how like mortgages are computed. If you buy a house for $200,000 and you buy it at 6% interest and you amortize that over 40 years, you can figure out what your future value, how much you're going to pay for that house. And then there's another formula where you can figure out what the payment is on that as well. So you can decide if if that's an affordable cost for you on a month-to-month basis. All right, here we have a little electrical problem, which once again is super because we can set up a spreadsheet to help us find some stuff based on Kirchhoff's law. Voltage is equal to amperage times resistance. So there we go. So anyway, so these are the problems that we're going to be working through this week. I will be in the lab next door today from whatever time, a couple of hours this afternoon, so we can work on this. Or if you are not able to join us face to face, you can definitely do that by remoting in as well. So hopefully, well, we'll see if we can remote in, because sometimes that's easier said than done. But the other piece is there are 2 parts to the Excel chapter 2, part 1 and part 2. So make sure that you keep both of those available to you. And then if you have any questions, let me know. So do you have any questions about ES 1060? No, you're good to go. You know how to proceed. All right, excellent. And so then aside from that, for other classes, we do have midterms this week. So while we're in lab, if you have any questions about the other classes, you can let me know. And I think I've got a schedule. I think maybe you're taking one this afternoon. So we'll be here at 1 or noon or whatever time you told me. We'll be here. We'll get it going. All right. Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you guys for your attention, and we will proceed with midterms week. Then there's no class Friday and there's no class Monday because it's fall break. So after we get done with midterms week, we'll have a little 4-day weekend to regain our bearings and get started with the second half. Right, have a great